You know that moment when you park outside your house and you don't get out? You just sit there, hands on the steering wheel, engine off, and you just need one more minute. Just one more minute before you walk through that door and become the man everyone needs you to be. The husband, the father, the provider, the rock, the one that holds everything together. I've been that man in that car, and I need to tell you what happened. Some years ago, I was expecting my third child. The same year, I was planning a wedding, and I was stuck in a job that was just slowly crushing me. Now, all of those things were blessings, don't get me wrong. Even a job I hated because I'd once prayed for it, but I'd outgrown it. I was stagnating, and the pressure of everything happening at once, it physically felt like the walls were closing in, like I couldn't breathe. Now, my wife was right there, and she more than plays her part, and I'm blessed to have family and friends I can lean on. But in my own head, I'd already decided I have to be the hero. I have to handle it. Nobody else can carry this. So I strapped on the armour. But underneath that armour, my mind was racing. How am I going to manage this third child? What is this wedding going to cost? Should we postpone it? How do I escape this job? Looking back, the fear and anxiety of what was ahead of me made those things seem bigger than they were. But at the time, I felt like I was drowning in the middle of an ocean with no land and no help in sight. And if anyone had asked me how I was doing, I would have replied, fine, I'm good, can't complain. All of the same scripts we've all been given. Men are taking their lives at nearly 4 times the rate of women. And one of the most common themes found in the notes left behind, in the last conversations, people replay over and over is some version of the same lie. I'm fine. But who taught us that? There's a moment in the very first book of the Bible that I often think about. So God creates Adam and Eve and places them in paradise. They have everything they need. A direct relationship with Him, complete freedom. But there's one rule. Don't eat from one specific tree. But they eat from it. And the moment they do, something changes inside of them. For the first time, a human being feels shame. They feel exposed. So they cover themselves and hide from God. And when God finds them, He doesn't open with anger. He asks a question. Who told you you were naked? Who told you you should feel this shame? Who put this on you? Where did that voice come from? I want you to hold on to that question because I think it's key to everything we're about to talk about. Who told you? From a young age, most boys absorb the same unspoken rules. Don't cry. Don't ask for help. Handle it. Man up. And by the time we're men, we don't even realize those rules are running our lives. We just know certain emotions are off limits. So we perform, we show up, we lead. And meanwhile, something inside us is quietly drowning. And it follows a pattern. First comes the suppression. Something happens. A diagnosis, a job loss, a baby on the way, and a man straps on the armor. I'll handle it. As the eldest of 4, and now the father of 4 myself, I know that weight, that feeling of, if I don't hold this together, the whole thing falls apart. Then comes the isolation. The mask gets exhausting to wear, so we pull away from friends, from our wives, from God, because isolation becomes easier than performance. And there's a layer to this no one talks about. Sometimes you're the person everyone else comes to, but then you can also wonder, who do I go to when I'm in trouble? Who do I go to when I need to talk about something? Then comes despair. The isolation confirms the lie. Nobody understands, nobody can help. And eventually crisis. The armor that you once wore now becomes a coffin, and the very thing you thought was protecting you is now cutting you off from the help that could save your life. That 4-fold suicide gap isn't because men have more problems. It's because we've been trained to face them alone. And the worst part, the loneliness. Because when you can never be honest about what's happening inside of you, you can never truly be known. You can be surrounded by people who love you and still feel completely alone. That's not strength. That's a slow death. And right now, someone you know is somewhere on that slope, convinced he's the only one. But here's where everything changes, because the Bible doesn't agree with any of this. Let me tell you about a man named David. You probably know the highlight: the shepherd, slingshot, giant goes down. We see that moment and we think, that's the peak. Like we do with so many people today, we see the highlight reel and assume the rest matches. But David's life after Goliath was filled with betrayal, heartbreak, failure, and suffering most of us can't imagine. And eventually David becomes king of an entire nation. The accolades, the respect, the power, the status. He receives everything a man could want. But even then, at the very top, this is what he writes: I am worn out from my groaning. All night long, I flood my bed with weeping and drench my couch with my tears. That's Psalm 6. And that is not the language of I'm fine. That is a king on his bedroom floor telling God the truth. In Psalm 13, he writes, How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow in my heart? When I first read that, it stopped me, because I thought, that's been me in certain seasons. That's exactly what it feels like, lying awake at 2, 3 in the morning, going round and round in your head, wrestling with thoughts that won't let you rest. And the king with everything felt the same thing. Now here's what makes David different. God called him a man after his own heart, not because he was perfect, but because he was honest. He didn't clean up the prayer before he prayed it. He brought the mess, and God honored that. Every lament psalm follows the same pattern. David begins with pain, but he ends with trust. The honesty itself becomes a path back to hope. And studies now show that honest, emotional prayer actually activates networks in the brain responsible for emotional regulation, which lowers cortisol, and it builds resilience over time. So what scientists are now discovering in labs today, a shepherd boy figured out 3,000 years ago. And David wasn't the only one. Let's take Elijah. This is the man who stood alone against 450 prophets of Baal and called down fire from heaven, the most powerful moment of his life. And then one death threat arrives, one message, and this mighty prophet shatters. He runs into the wilderness, collapses under a tree, and prays to die. He says, "It is enough, Lord, take my life." I think about that a lot because I know what it feels like to win the battle and still feel like you're losing, to do everything right on the outside and be falling apart on the inside. So how does God respond? No rebuke, no lecture. God lets him sleep. Then he sends an angel with food and water. Twice. Before God says a single word, he takes care of Elijah's body. Rest, food, presence. God gave him what we now call therapy 3,000 years before we had a word for it. And when God finally speaks, it isn't in fire. It isn't in an earthquake. It's a gentle whisper, because what Elijah needed wasn't power. It was presence. And then there's Jesus himself. His friend Lazarus dies, and he knows he's about to raise him from the dead. He knows how this ends. And still, Jesus wept. He didn't skip past the pain to get to the miracle. He sat in it. He felt it, showing us that feeling deeply isn't a flaw. It's by design. I was talking with my dad a while back, and the reason this came up is because over a short period of time, we knew a few men that had died, and they weren't old at all, like late 50s, mid 60s, and they all died from similar things, heart problems. And from the outside, people might say the usual things. Maybe they didn't take care of themselves. Maybe they were just unhealthy. But I started to think deeper, and I started to question that, how is this all happening around the same time? And I said to my dad, do you think some men can actually die from heartache? Not just the physical kind, but from decades of stored up hurt, pain they never talked about, anger they never released, trauma they never processed, just carrying it year after year until their body couldn't carry it anymore. Especially men from his generation, the ones who were taught to just handle things a certain way, never show it, to just push through before mental health was even a term. But they held onto it for so long that it broke them. Elijah collapsed under a tree 3,000 years ago, and men are still collapsing today under the same weight for the same reason. The problem isn't feeling the weight. The problem is pretending the weight isn't there. Remember the question God asked in the garden, who told you? I've been sitting with that question for months now, because if God asks who told you, it means there's a voice that we should be listening to instead. And God has never been silent about who we are. From the beginning, the scripture says, we were created in his image. He calls us his workmanship, his children, and chosen people. Our identity was never supposed to come from what we earn, what we own, or how unbreakable we appear. To build our identity on them is dangerous, because they can vanish overnight. And Jesus said it plainly, do not store up for yourselves treasures on this earth, but store up treasures in heaven. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. There are two paths through this life. You either walk it with God or you walk it without him. And I think back to that season, the baby, the wedding, the job, and I wish I had God in my life then. Not because the problems would have disappeared, but because I would have had somewhere to take them. Instead, I was pouring water into a bucket with a hole in the bottom, being filled with nothing except what the world told me to be filled with. Having God in my life now changes everything. I have somewhere to take the fear, the anger, the exhaustion, and he doesn't tell me to man up. He meets me in it. And the closer I've got to him, the clearer my identity has become and the quieter those other voices have got. So if you're still watching, here's what I want to say to you. Get honest with God. I know what you're thinking. You already pray. I did too. And in the early stages, I was just praying out of routine, just going through the motion, saying what I thought sounded good, what God wanted to hear. But he doesn't want the polished version of you. He wants the real one. Pray the angry prayers, the scared ones, the ones you're afraid to say out loud. David did it. Elijah did it. Jesus did it in the garden with sweat and blood. God is not intimidated by your mess. He's waiting for it. And find one person, just one, a friend, a mentor, a pastor. Take off the mask. You don't have to tell everyone, just one man that you trust. Scripture says, iron sharpens iron. You were never designed to carry this alone. And I promise you, the moment you say out loud what you've been carrying in silence, something breaks open. Also, start questioning the script. Ask yourself, who told me I had to be this way? Who told me men can't feel? Take that question back to God. That same question he asked in the garden. Who told you? If the answer is culture, if it's social media, an influencer or celebrity that you admire, some unspoken rule you've absorbed growing up, that's not from him. Let him redefine it. It's okay not to be okay. Not as a slogan, but as a biblical truth. The strongest men in scripture were the ones honest about their brokenness. And God met every single one of them, not with a lecture, not with disappointment, but with rest, with food, with presence. True strength isn't found in the man who never breaks. It's found in the man who breaks honestly and lets God meet him there. Let's break the silence together.